What's going on, everybody? I got Perry here next to me. Eric's still away. Sorry. If he watches it and he reviews it, I'll post a link for his review in the box below. So we went to go see Dr. Sleep, which is directed by Mike Flanagan. Dr. Sleep is actually the sequel to the iconic The Shining film. I consider it to be one of the best horror films ever made, if not the best horror film ever made, for obvious reasons. And even though it's my favorite horror film, or let me back up real quick. I don't know if it's my favorite horror film, but it's got to be like top 5. But even though I really, really love the film, I really wasn't too excited for this film, just because when I watched the trailer, there were a lot of things about it that were kind of annoying, and I wasn't sold on it. And, you know, I mean, I don't know, how do you feel about the trailer? Did you not mind it, or? You actually were reading the book, so.
Yeah, I'm reading the book currently. I didn't want to, I didn't get a chance to finish the book, because unfortunately I work a full-time job, so there's that. But I think at first when I saw it, I was excited, but the more I thought about it, the less excited I got about watching this film.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, this being a sequel to The Shining, and this being a common trend in Hollywood where let's make a sequel to a movie that came out like 20, 30 years ago and
cash in.
Yeah, cash in and fuck it all up.
So, yeah, that being said, I wasn't really too excited for this film. Even though Mike Flanagan, you know, he's a pretty notable horror director. He's, you know, I've only seen Oculus and Ouija 2. And honestly, they're both pretty solid horror films. Like, I don't think they're amazing or anything, but they're both pretty solid for what they were both going for. But yeah, so coming out of this film, guys, this was overall, I gotta be honest, it was pretty disappointing in a lot of different ways. You know, especially the fact that, you know, this is a sequel to The Shining, again, like just one of the most iconic horror films ever made. And it obviously has huge shoes to fill in. This has really high, a really high like threshold, because it's just like it's trying to follow up to one of the greatest horror films ever made, and obviously, you know, people are going to expect, you know, something that's really great out of it. I wasn't really, you know, again, I wasn't really thinking I was going to get any of that. But even though I went in with like, you know, not so high hopes, this still just bothered me in a lot of different ways. There were some aspects of it that I thought were well done, and you know, I'll give credit where credit is due. There were certain moments in this film that I dug for the most part, but I just think overall, I don't know, this film is overall just kind of mediocre in my opinion. It feels very Hollywood in a lot of different ways. One thing that why The Shining was so great is because it was so uncompromising, and Kubrick just went all in for his own vision, and this film doesn't really give off that vibe at all. And guys, I mean, the first act of this film is literally just there to give information. I mean, that's literally the first act of this film. I usually don't get headaches at all when I'm watching film unless they're really, really frustrating. I got a pretty good throbbing headache throughout the first act of this film, because it was just so annoying to keep like seeing scene after scene after scene just there to spoon feed information to the audience, when I know a lot of the stuff could have been conveyed in a much more visionary way. And the opening scene of this film was also it just fell flat. Like, it was just the film editing and the way that it was done, like there wasn't really a vision behind it. It didn't feel like there was really an aesthetic vision to really any of the horror. And it just, I don't know, guys, the first act was really frustrating. And you know, finally in the second act, it starts picking up a bit, starts getting a bit more engaging, a bit more juicy, and also a bit more visionary in some aspects of it. But then the third act comes along, and it's just like a mixed bag, like, because the third act, you know, it really starts calling back to The Shining, because the second act is just like its own kind of thing. And then the third act, you know, it really tries to milk that nostalgia, and it just felt, a lot of it felt really forced. A lot of it didn't feel natural. And the recasting of like Jack Nicholson's character just felt, it's just like, why? Like, Jack Nicholson has such an iconic face that no one else has, and then when you try to cast somebody who looks like him, it's just gonna fail, like, no matter who you have. And it just took, there's a lot of things about this movie that took me out, and that was one of them. But I guess with that being said, I'll give it to Perry. I've talked a bit.
Yeah, I thought this film was pretty mediocre too. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything, masterful, because I knew, like, going into this, nothing can touch The Shining. It's, like you said, it's one of the greatest horror films. It's also on my top 5 favorite horror films of all time. And I couldn't even get a solid movie out of this. Like, it was literally exposition, the movie.
Yeah, because the information doesn't stop either.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just the first act. Like, the second act and the third act, especially the third act, just starts getting really information heavy.
Yeah, there's so many scenes that just explain what the cult are capable of doing. It's like, we got that. You don't need to have another character say that they're capable of eating people's powers. Like, and it's like, I knew that this was... It's so strange because the first scene, like the opening scene, which I really didn't like, I immediately, like, I already had my reservations going into this film, but as soon as I saw the first scene, I'm like, no, this is not something I'm gonna like or I could recommend, because the first scene literally just fell flat. It packed no punch.
I feel the same way.
And there were so many scenes in there that just fell flat and didn't pack a punch at all. And there was a lot of scenes that could have been cut out. It's weird how this film manages to feel underwritten, but at the same time bloated at the same time. That is very unique. It's like, how does a film feel underwritten and bloated at the same time? It really didn't need to be 2.5 hours long.
No,
and I'm typically not that guy that's like, oh, it should have been shorter.
Because 2 hours and a half, we both agree, that's like the creme de la creme runtime.
Yeah, that's Kino runtime right there.
Yeah, it is. It can be.
But I feel like coming out of it, there is a good movie in here, like a good hour and 45 movie in here.
Yeah.
Because Ian McGregor's good. For the most part, the acting was solid.
Yeah.
There was one actor in particular. His name is Cliff Curtis. If anybody knows who Cliff Curtis is, please tell that man to stop acting.
I haven't seen him in a single movie that I've liked.
I think he was in that Fear the Walking Dead show, which was awful, and he was in Live Free or Die Hard. He played such a minuscule character.
Colombiana, he was in that movie too. I know you haven't seen that.
Oh
probably.
My god, I'm glad I didn't see that.
But he has, like, in that movie, he has like a weird forced, like, Scarface accent. It's hilarious.
Oh god, it sounded like he was doing an accent in this movie too. Yeah. And he was terrible, easily the worst character in this movie. And I got excited because Bruce Greenwood was in this movie. I was like, okay, if Bruce Greenwood would tag along with Ian McGregor, we might have an interesting movie, or a more interesting movie than what we got. But no, we got stuck with Cliff Curtis. And of course, it's like every time he spoke, I just wanted to walk out of the theater, because I don't know what it is about him as an actor, but he really irks me. He doesn't know how to emote. Yeah. All of his lines just fall completely flat. I will say Rebecca Ferguson was really good in this movie.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, I think she was casted really well, and for what she was given, I thought she did a great job at what she was supposed to do. Yeah,
Rose the Hat. Like, I was curious because she is the leader of the cult. And that was a big part of whether I was going to like this movie or not. And, of course, even though they succeeded with Rose the Hat, obviously I still didn't care for the movie. And what's weird is this movie is rated R, but it feels like it doesn't have any balls,
There's only one scene in particular in this film, in the second act, that I was like, okay, that's risky, and that's engaging. And I enjoyed that because, I can see, like, I could definitely see a fucking casual watching that part and just being like, oh, that's way too far. Like, oh, I can't watch that.
Yeah.
Because, it involves a child, and, I can see someone being really upset by the content, even though it's not really... I mean, I've seen a fuckload worse, but, the fact that it or at least tried to tackle something that was pretty controversial, I'll give her credit for that.
Yeah, and that scene actually had a lot of tension to it, in my opinion. Editing was a little weird though, but the scene had a lot of tension to it. One thing in particular I will give this film, at least they tried to recreate scenes from The Shining as opposed to do the Ready Player One thing where they literally like cut and paste scenes of The Shining into the movie, because that was incredibly lazy and it was really annoying in Ready Player One. Not that the Shining recreations in this film weren't annoying to some extent, but at least they didn't go that far with it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, for me, like, some of the Shining stuff did feel a bit cut and pasty, but then some of it felt like it was incorporated in a more clever way.
But I mean, like actually putting scenes from the Shining movie into the movie.
Oh,
that's
the actual footage, you mean?
Yeah, that's what Ready Player One did, and that's incredibly lazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Shining references were pretty forced. I will say it's so strange because you kind of want to know where Danny Torrance's character ends up after all these years, and I feel like his character, you know, like reintroducing us to the character, I felt like that was really glossed over. Like in the novel, he struggles with alcoholism, but that's barely mentioned in the movie.
Yeah, that's touched on for like maybe like 10 or 15 minutes, and then like it's like 8 years later and it's done. Like there's like a big jarring cut. There's like three different jarring cuts in time, like in the first act alone, that I was like, damn, like this much time has already passed. Like, yeah, there's a lot of jarring things about this, and honestly, one of them for me has to do with the fact that the premise of this film revolving around the cult and everything, it felt like overly supernatural. And, you know, I get that The Shining itself is a supernatural type of film. You know, the fact that, you know, the Danny has these powers or whatever. But, you know, the way that Kubrick envisioned it, he did it in a way that felt more rooted to reality and more unsettling. And in this, a lot of it just comes off a bit cartoony, and it just comes off like just, again, just way too much on that kind of spectrum, just like way too like supernatural, where I'm like taking out of the fact of I'm being unsettled because I feel like I'm not watching something that's really realistic at all. And I get that.
Well, I don't think it was going for realism, but that goes with the problem.
That's one of my problems with it.
That's the biggest problem the film has. It's identity crisis. It tries to do Kubrick justice, it tries to do King justice, and of course it doesn't mesh well at all.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's just that, yeah, I mean, it sucks because, like, I feel like Kubrick almost got no justice out of this. I feel like Stephen King got a bunch of justice out of this shit. But, like, me as someone who loves The Shining, like, there was hardly anything in here about Kubrick's vision that I was like, oh, cool. There's only maybe, like, one scene in the first act, one scene involving Danny Torrance as a child that felt like, oh, this is his own vision that also incorporated Kubrick's vision. And it's a scene involving Danny getting a box and then using that box as he goes into the bathroom and then like shuts the door. The way that like it was cutting away to like certain shots, I was like, that's pretty artsy looking, and I enjoyed that because it reminded me of Kubrick. But we didn't get enough of that kind of like creative vision out of it. Like a lot of it just felt really Hollywoody and really safe, you know, besides that one scene in the second act.
Well, the thing is like, this is Warner Brothers. It's a mainstream film. It's like you said, like there will never be another film like The Shining. So I wasn't expecting anything like too art house. So, but even for a mainstream film, it still failed. It still is a pretty mediocre film.
It just sucks because like The Shining was a mainstream film. Everybody knew about The Shining, and Steve. I know we're living in a totally different time now, but it just sucks that now we live in a time where like most of the time, for any kind of mainstream source, we're not going to get anything that's really creative, like at least overly creative, to the point where like that you can tell that the film director actually has his own uncompromising vision behind it. And Kubrick obviously had that, and it was great. And you know, again, like we got lucky with Joker, like so you could tell that someone had a vision behind that and just did exactly what he wanted to do full force. But this, again, it doesn't feel like the director just like did exactly what he wanted to do. It just felt like a bunch of series of compromises to make a competent film that hopefully people like, and that's kind of what we got.
Yeah, I don't blame Mike Flanagan for this. Like, I don't really blame him. I don't know. Maybe there's more studio interference, or maybe Mike Flanagan is to blame. I don't know the full story here. Yeah, and that's the thing is what you're talking about, is because you got to think. Look at all the films we've seen this year. Look at all the horror films in particular. All the horror films we've seen that are mainstream have been disappointment. Pretty much all the horror films that we've seen that are art house, besides In Fabric,
are fantastic.
Yeah, are fantastic.
And even In Fabric, like, at least that had its own vision. Like, at least that was creative. I mean, it might not have been like spectacular or anything, but at least I can give it credit. Like, there was actual vision there.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and this film, like, Dr. Sleep didn't even feel like it had its own score. Like, it was using just pretty much all the music from The Shining, which really pissed me off.
Yeah, and then, like, the opening to this movie used the score of The Shining for like 5 seconds, and then it just moves on. Like, it was like, so it just, again, forced. A lot of stuff The Shining just didn't feel like it was used in a really creative way. It was forced.
Oh, and one of my, like, the thing that was gonna give me a headache in this film the most is the fact that, like, this is a 2.5 hour movie. I kid you not, out of those 2 hours, in the background, you can hear a heart-thumping sound non-stop, which is very cliched, and it's very annoying. And a lot of the music in this film was so intense, even when the most mundane things were going on. It didn't fit the tone of the film at all.
Yeah.
Because, like, literally, a girl or a character will get off a bus, and you hear, like, violent violin strings playing in the background. It's like, there's no horror going on here, right here.
And they would use stuff like you said, like from The Shining, like the fucking like notes from the fucking, like, you know, the ding 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 ding, 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 ding. You would hear that, but like it was used like in a moment where there's no real suspense or horror going on.
Yeah.
And it was just so frustrating.
God, the ending of this film just felt so flat. Like, it honestly left me cold. I felt I think that was the best way to describe how this film, like, left me, is cold.
It's just, again, it's another one of those Hollywood endings. Everything's wrapped up in a bow tie.
Yeah.
No ambiguity, no room to really interpret anything, which is another reason why The Shining was great, because people could walk out of it, like, thinking about it and talking about the movie in a more thought-provoking way. This doesn't really do that for you.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't really leave you anything to talk about. It's like, yeah, you can review it, but it's not going to stick with you. I kid you not. And, you know, a week from now, I'm probably going to forget this movie.
I have no desire to see this movie again.
Me neither.
And I know, like, we're, like, shitting on it, like, pretty hard right now, but I mean, what can I say? Like, it just kind of bummed me out, because The Shining is a really huge movie, and I've also been seeing critics give this film some praise, and I just don't see it at all. I really don't see it. Mm-hmm. Like I said, there's some things that I'll give it credit. Like, there are certain concepts in this movie that I thought did have some vision. Honestly, I think the second act of this movie is the best act.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt.
Yeah, because, like, at least the second act, I think it had the most vision, and there was the most suspense, and I was actually, like, engaged for the most part in the second act.
No joke, when the second act was going on, I was like, oh man, I might actually end up liking this movie. And then the third act happened and it just completely let me down.
The third act is, like, just a big mixed bag of, like, hits and misses.
Yeah.
And this first act is just awful. I'm sorry, I really don't have anything redeeming to say about the first act, really, except for maybe a small thing. But other than that, the first act's pretty bad. The second act's definitely the strongest, but yeah.
And I love Ian McGregor too, but he's another one of those actors, like, he gets involved with a lot of mediocre, a lot of subpar films, you know? It's just so frustrating. Like I said, there is a good film within the Dr. Sleep storyline, a good hour and 45-minute film, and we just did not get that.
Yeah. Pretty frustrating. I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I should really talk about, but I think I pretty much said everything.
Oh, I want to.
No, go. Yeah, go ahead. What?
Well, I don't want to.
Is it a spoiler?
It's not a spoiler, really. It kind of is, and it kind of isn't. But
it's okay. It's light spoiler warning. If you want, don't want to.
No,
hear it.
I'm not even gonna mention it.
Okay, fine.
I'm not gonna mention it. I want to, but I don't want to do.
Is it something in the second act, or third act, or
second act?
Oh yeah.
I'm not gonna mention it. It's just, it was not very well choreographed at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm finished though.
And even like in the third act, like a lot of like the tense like plot conflicts, it was literally the same thing as The Shining, the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And that was frustrating too, because it's like, do you have to copy The Shining this much? Like I'm not sure what's in the novel. Like if it's in the novel, okay, but like I just don't like the novel then. And again, like as a director, like I don't know, it just sucks because I don't know how much freedom they gave Mike Flanagan. It seems like they didn't give him much freedom at all.
Yeah.
But like I don't know, it's just,
there are just so many scenes where you're like, are we seriously going here right now?
yeah. Kind of baffled by some of it. I'm like, fuck.
Yeah. There was... I feel like cringe is like such an overused word, but there were so many things where I was like... I mean, there was a few things I'm like, God, this is just cringy.
Yeah. Definitely agree there. All right, well, I think we've talked enough about it. I don't have any more to say.
Yeah, I'm gonna forget this movie in a week, maybe less than that.
It's underwhelming for me for sure. Like I said, it didn't have much vision behind it in my opinion. There were some things that I felt like had vision, but it just wasn't enough. Felt too compromising. Maybe a little bit too much like the novel. I don't know. I didn't read the novel, but for me again, like. Literature and film are two different mediums, and sometimes they don't translate the best if you just copy the same thing. And I just wanted a bit more like vision out of this, and I didn't really get it. And it's really like it just spoon feeds a lot of information. It's really information heavy fucking film.
It's an exposition. It's exposition. The movie.
Yeah. And most of the acting's pretty good. Some of the acting isn't very good. Even
Cliff Curtis.
Yeah, and even like the little girl. Like I understand that she's a kid, but like some of the delivery wasn't very good.
I'll give you that. Ian McGregor and Rebecca Ferguson.
They were the standouts.
Yeah, they were the standouts. It's like everyone else, like y'all are just here.
Yeah.
Either you suck or y'all are just here to be here.
The callbacks to The Shining, it was like hit and miss. Some of it was incorporated in a clever way. Some of it was just there just to milk that sweet nostalgia out of you. And it just, I don't know, wasn't a fan of some of it. So yeah, guys, as far as my rating goes, I'll give Dr. Sleep a 5 out of 10. And, when I was watching the second act, I was thinking, oh, this might deserve a fresh rating. This might get a 6, but...
Yeah, I was thinking the same
really?
thing, yeah.
And then, like, after that third act, I'm like, ugh. Like, it wasn't absolutely horrible, but it was just too much of a mixed bag.
Yeah.
And, so 5 out of 10 for me. How about just your turn, Perry?
Like I said, like, I viewed it as its own animal. I tried to not think of it as a Shining sequel. And it still disappointed me, guys. Like, I'm really sorry. I wish I could tell you that this is a solid film, a solid sequel to The Shining, but it just isn't. And I agree with Carlos once again. I'm also going to give this a 5 out of 10.
Hey, same page.
It's weird how we... God damn.
Sometimes it can be on, like, right on the same page, and then sometimes it's like, whoop.
Yeah, definitely.
But, sorry, guys. It just... I don't know how everybody's going to feel about this, though. Like, I can't say with confidence that our feelings are going to be the same as most film critics.
Right.
I think I can see some film critics, like, getting what they want maybe out of it and saying, oh, this is a pretty solid movie. I can see that coming out of it. But just for me, and I guess for Perry, too, like, it just missed on a lot of different ways.
Yeah. There was some interesting ideas in there, but... didn't flesh out the ideas that well. Just relied way too much on nostalgia, and some of the characters even felt underdeveloped. A lot of the big players felt underdeveloped. Mm-hmm. And it's like I said, it's a film that feels bloated and yet underwritten at the same time.
It's so funny. It's so weird, but
it's
you're right,
so
though.
strange.
You're so right on that.
But stay tuned, because tomorrow night we have a Jojo Rabbit review, Taika Waititi's new film, which I'm sure will be a lot better than this.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. It's getting mixed reviews right now, but I'm pretty sure it's just people butthurt about the content.
Yeah, that's all it is. Taika Waititi does no wrong.
Well, all right, guys. That's our review of Dr. Sleep. Sorry that we didn't really like it that much. I mean, I wish I could sit here and say that it was great. Trust me, I wanted to come here and say that it was really good, but unfortunately that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But if you really like what we had to say about Dr. Sleep, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content. See ya.